12 and loose. Goddamn Jesus Christ. Alejandro Torres, do you hear me? Alejandro Torres, do you hear me? Alejandro? Alejandro? Yes, I know he should be able to, but he can't. Alejandro, do you hear me? Goddamn Jesus Christ to hell. God damn Jesus Christ to hell. ALEJ. Andro. Alejandro. Goddamn Jesus Christ to hell. Mason Morgan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can't hear you. Doggone. Try again.
Hello?
Yes, I hear you now. Was that Mason?
Yeah, Morgan Mason.
Okay. Allison Taylor. Do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What did I do wrong? I had one more time. I changed my setting. Answer me one more time. Caitlin, do you hear me?
I hear you.
Thank you. I still need team members from a few of you. Page 12 in the class pack. Let's review. We're talking about linear programming models. I defined it as choosing variables of changing cells or variable cells to optimize the target cell, the objective cell. Constraints, that is equations and inequalities, limit the values the variables can take. You want to maximize or minimize something such as profit or cost. Most clearly understood from examples, we saw the intro prod AB, the Burger King, and the Mountain Investment. On page 12, last class we solved the Burger King and did not like the answer because it did not have exactly one drink. So I fixed that. I added a new constraint. I did not like the fact that we had salad dressings but no salads. So I fixed that. Total salads equals total dressings. Terminology, solution is the values of the changing cells or the variable cells. The value of a linear program is the value of the target cell. Let me go to the intern scheduling model next. So the book is Intern Scheduling Model, Intern Scheduling. The Dresser Clinic is open every day. Each week, the 14 interns shown must be scheduled, Smith, Jones, etc. The changing cells in the red border contain a 1 if the intern is to be scheduled to work that day. Like the Burger King, 1 means yes, I want to eat that food or drink that drink. In this example, 1 means yes, Smith works Monday. Smith works Tuesday. Smith does not work Wednesday. These are binary cells, binary changing cells, abbreviated BIN. A maximum,
Professor, we can't see your screen.
oh my. I turned that on and then I turned it off. Okay, thank you. Zoom moves things depending on whether you're sharing or not sharing. More? I don't see it. Should I look for it here? I don't think so. Should I look for it here? I think so, but I don't see it. Do you want to stop the cloud recording? Cancel. God damn. Now I see it for the first time. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out to me. 1 means Smith works Monday and Tuesday. 0 or empty means Smith does not work Wednesday, does not work Thursday. 5 is the maximum number of shifts that anyone can work. So I will take row sums. Look at those yellow cells, the row sums. I-21 is the number of days or shifts that Smith is assigned to. And we will tell solver that I-21 is less than or equal to K-21. Specifically, we will tell solver the entire yellow block is less than or equal to the blue-gray block. Column sums will also be used for solver. Look at those pink or violet cells. We need 8 people there on Monday, 8 on Tuesday, etc. And as the weekend approaches and people start beating each other up, we need more people, 11 on Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Thursday. So the pink cells must be at least equal to the gray blue cells beneath them. Let's go to look at the cost function, the double black border. Let's review the legend. Red border, management decisions, changing cells. We can type anything we want there. Blue-gray data that can't change. Double black is the target cell to optimize. Target cell is 200 multiplied by the sum of the changing cells, B21 to H34. Data solver. N26, the payroll is to be minimized. Let me put that on the clipboard. Alt print screen. Alt print screen. There's the image. I wanted it bigger. N26 is to be minimized by changing B21 to H34. B21 to H34 has to be binary. And I see we have two named ranges. Number working, at least BH37. Days worked, no more than K21, K34. The yellow cells are the named range days worked, and the pink cells, violet cells, are the number working. There is one answer. The absolute minimum cost is unique. It always is for a linear program, 13,800. See if you can reproduce the solution by clearing the changing cells, going back to the solver and solving it. I ask the question, are named ranges helpful? This is subjective. Not everybody agrees. Most people agree. To confirm the constraints, suppose I do not know if the constraints are correct. They are correct, but suppose I don't know that. I have to look up the definition of number working and days worked. If I had not used named ranges, if I had simply written what I meant, BH35 is at least BH37 and I21 to I34 less than or equal to K21 to K34, it would have been easier to confirm. Now I lost my underline. There we go. Named ranges in some cases can be counterproductive. But many people like them. More than 75%, I think, like them. So I will ask you to use named ranges occasionally. I guess I'm not a very good driver. This morning, Siri said, in 400 feet, stop and let me out. Let's look at Shell Credit Union. Description: an employee credit union is planning its investment policy. 4 different kinds of loans and bonds. The investments and average returns are shown. Diversification requires auto plus home mortgage less than or equal to 200,000. Home mortgage plus personal loans less than or equal to 300,000. Personal plus miscellaneous cannot exceed or no more than or less than or equal to, that's all the same thing. Less than or equal to, cannot exceed, no more than 250K. Miscellaneous plus bonds cannot exceed 400. Budget of $500,000. Red means we're not going to cover that in this course. Some of you with math backgrounds will find it helpful to look at that. Let's look at the sheet first called Solution Investment LP Error Prone. We have the annual rates of return. We have the changing cells in the red border. The total invested is the sum. This is G16. The total invested is the sum of B through F16. And now I try to color code to show you what I'm doing, but I can't. I run out of colors. The yellow cell G17 has the sum of the two yellow changing cells, auto plus home. The blue cell G20 has the sum of the two blue cells, miscellaneous plus bonds. But the colors overlap, and this is not helpful for a large problem anyway. Not really not helpful for this one. A larger problem, this approach, the direct sum of these two. In G17, I mean B16 plus C16. In G18, I mean C16 plus D16. In G19, I mean D16 plus E16. Let me show you the indicator constants, which you've seen before. I put these ones. The first constraint is in row 17. Let me make it real tall just for your attention. 1 times auto loans plus 1 multiplied by home loans plus 0 times personal miscellaneous and bonds gives 200, which cannot exceed 200. You can see these. The logic is not buried in the formula like in the previous sheet. Your secretary, your administrative assistant can type these numbers and print them, and you can confirm them from the printing. The formulas are all the same, but not the sum of this one and that one, but rather the sum product of all of the changing cells with the indicator constants. Now I'm using a small example for teaching. If we had 200 changing cells, I think you would agree this approach in sheet solution investment LP preferred is less error prone, easier to confirm than in the previous sheet. They are both correct. 1, 2, and 3. The answer is 49.250. So we've seen now 5 applications of linear programming. After I review, we're going to stop and go to another topic and later come back to linear programming. We've seen the intro prod AB. How many A's and B's do you make? The Burger King. What foods do you consume? The Mountain Investment. The intern scheduling. And the credit union planning. We've seen the color conventions. I don't have them here. Let me flip back to intern scheduling. Well, I closed it. Red border is changing cells. Blue-gray is data that cannot change within the context of the model. Double black border is the target cell. I want to go next to pivot tables. I trust that you did the readings. It will be helpful to you to look at page, I think that's 14. Yes, page 14 with the instructions while I recreate the pivot table. It is 3:18. Lecture and shell pivot table. The leftmost sheet. A21 to F121 has sales data, medical devices. The item IDs are B3070T and VT231. The brands, there are 3 of them, Aaron Bovey, Datascope, and Draeger. Which item is doing well? Which brand is doing well? Which sales rep is doing well? And which reps are doing crummy? Use a pivot table to answer these. Let me delete the text box. It's in the way with only one screen. Select one cell in the range of data, and then Excel will guess, expanding left, right, up, down, and select it for you. Insert pivot table. Answer the question or confirm the answer to the question. Is your data in A1 through F121? Yes, it is. The default is a new worksheet. That's fine, but for learning, for teaching, the existing worksheet is superior, I think. I want to put the pivot table adjacent to the data so you can see the data and the pivot table. Answer the question for the location. I asked you to start it in N121, I think. Let me see. N114 in this version. You can, the green cell, you can type it or use the mouse. Now we have the empty pivot table waiting to be designed. This is the pivot table field list. For some reason, it defaults so small that you can't see the spaces you need. That's the default. Look at my screen, please. You need to be able to see the fields at the top and the 4 areas, the columns area, the rows area, the sum of the values area, and the filters area. I ask you to use brand and rep in rows. Brand in rows. Rep in rows. Brand and rep, I did not check them. They became checked when I dragged them into the rows section. Sales in the sum of values. Drag it down. Item ID in columns. And now the pivot table field list will close if I select a cell outside of the pivot table. It will reopen if I select a cell in the pivot table. Close, open. If it's in the way, I can formally close it. Then I'll have to formally open it. Please make sure you can reproduce this form of the pivot table. The default layout is not particularly user-friendly. It refers generically to column labels and row labels. Let's change it to classic layout like I asked you in the readings. Right click, pivot table options, display tab, classic pivot table layout. I find that easier to read. Instead of row labels and column labels, it says rep, Bert, Cheryl, Dennis, Jack, Jim, Joe, Karen. Brand, Aaron Bovey, Datascope. You cannot change part of a pivot table. It'll beep at you. Let me come here and press the delete key. You can't do that, but you can change the appearance, the format. Let's make it currency with no decimals. Control Shift, down arrow. Home tab, accounting number format, no decimals. Show of hands in the room. How many of you are keeping up with me? I would like to vote among the Zoomers. Yes, if you're keeping up with me. No, if you're not. 8 yeses, 9 yeses, 1 no. 11 yeses. There are 31 of you, not counting me. So 11 have voted. I guess some of you don't know how to vote. All right, let's follow my directions. Not that there's any particular way to proceed, but in order to teach you the capabilities, you would benefit from following along with me, at least initially. Any thoughts on Tom's performance? I cannot change the data, but I can certainly change the format. Tom, I'll highlight his name in the Draeger section, in the Datascope section, and in the Aaron Bovey section, there are no sales by Tom. These reps are in alphabetical order. Tom sold nothing of the Aaron Bovey. Tom sold 93,000 of the Datascopes, but everybody else, almost everyone else, Marguerite's one exception, he's the second worst of every sales rep for the Datascope. He is the worst for the Draeger, hundreds of thousands, a million. He's only at 53,000. So Tom's not doing very well. Any thoughts on Tom's performance? Very bad. We can redesign the pivot table if we don't like what we see. We can get rid of rep in one of two ways. Watch me drag the label till I get the reddish brown X. And now that field is removed. Let me undo that and redo it. I dragged the rep out of the table. Let me undo and remove it. If you prefer, you can go back to the field list. It's closed. Right click, show field list. And here you can get rid of rep by dragging it out of the rows section or simply by deselecting it here. Probably the easiest way to remember is we dragged it into the rep section. We dragged rep into the rows section. Let's drag it back out. And later we can put it in. When I introduced this subject, I asked you what was the best brand, Aaron Bovey, Datascope, or Draeger. Look at those three numbers. Let me turn them yellow. Aaron Bovey at 11 plus million as opposed to Datascope, almost 8 million. Let me close this formally. As opposed to Draeger, I must not have formatted that properly. $875. So the best brand is Aaron Bovey. The best item, let me continue with the format. 6 and a few million, 6,621,000 or 2,130,000. The BT-3070. Now let's put rep back in. Right click, show field list, put rep back in the rows. Let me give you a few minutes. Hold. This is an image of what I wanted you to create. Sum of sales, brand, rep. Tom is not shown since he didn't sell any. Bert isn't shown since he didn't sell any. Let me give you 3 minutes to review this. Perhaps you'd like to completely delete the pivot table and recreate it. You can't delete part of it. I'll try and it'll beep. You'll have to select the entire pivot table and press delete. And now it's gone. I'm going to undo that, but perhaps you'd like to delete it and recreate it. My wife made me join a bridge club. I jump off next Tuesday.
Hey, Professor,
Yes,
how did you delete that pivot table again?
you have to select the entire table. And I find it easiest to select extra cells.
And then right click.
Let's go on. Let's uncheck the 2 new reps, Bert and Tom. Let's go to the rep field, drop down arrow, and deselect Bert because he's a brand new hire, and so is Tom. So once again, I'll cancel that so you can see me do it again. Rep has a drop down arrow next to it, so does brand. Drop down and deselect Bert, I'm asking you to, and Tom. And now the arrow changes to a filter, a funnel. There's no room to show exactly what's been filtered. Deselect Bird and Tom. Let's look at the grand totals. Let's toggle them on and off. Let me temporarily use a tiny zoom. It's going to be too small. There are two grand totals for the bottom and for the top. Let me discuss them a little bit more. Sum of sales. Let's change that to the average of sales by clicking the label and changing from the resulting menu. Average, okay. Click the label. Average of sales. Double click it. Nope. And choose sum. Okay. Sum and average, I think, are the most common. You could count. You know the difference between count and sum. If I sell you $100 and I sell him $300, that's 2 sales. The count is 2. 100 plus 300 is 400 is the sum. Let's go back to average. And let's look at these numbers that I'll give a large font right now. Average of sales. There was a $518,000 and an $83,000. Clearly, grand total does not refer to the sum. It refers to the overall average. The average of 518 and 83 is 228. Let's notice there's a Pivot Tables Tools tab of the ribbon when we select a cell in a pivot table. Now there is no such tab because I'm not in a pivot table. Now there is such a tab because my active cell is in the pivot table. No such ribbon tab. The ribbon tab comes back. Design tab, layout group, pure memory. Pivot table tools, design tab, not the analyze tab, not the power pivot tab, not the help tab. Design tab, layout group, grand totals. You can toggle them off or on. Off for rows and columns, on for rows and columns, on for rows only, on for columns only. Let's turn them off. The lower left corner and the upper right corner no longer show grand totals. Let's do another problem, healthcare in class. Let's do the same type of thing all over again. A1 through F 8,401 gives revenue for the Tennessee Medical Group. Which service groups have not been doing well? 8,400 records. Let's do some pre-processing. A pivot table. Select one cell in the pivot table started in H1. You do that for me. I'll wait 10, 15 seconds and then I'll do it. Insert tab of the ribbon, pivot table. Confirm A1 through F 8,401. Existing worksheet, H1. Okay. There's the empty table and the field list. I ask you to use service group and year in rows. Year in rows, service group, and then year in rows. Amount billed in the sum of the values. Area in columns. I'm going to have to get rid of something. The dialog box, the text box. Classic layout. In this course, I will always ask you to go for classic layout. Right click, pivot table options, display, classic pivot table. Mac, same general idea. Right click, pivot table options, display. Format it to currency with no decimals. If this were a case study, I'd ask you to critique it, but I don't want to give you the class time to discover that in Nashville, ear, nose, and throat over the 4-year period, 2016, 17, 18, 19, we went from 238,000, the next year 92,000, the next year 34,000, the next year 13,000. A terrible trend that should have been caught a long time ago. Look at N3. Nashville. I think I missed one. N3. I spoke correctly, but I made a mousographical error. N3 is 167,000. This is important for you to pay attention. Amount billed. Let me change E4 to a big number. And something is dreadfully wrong. N3 says the summation of all Nashville cardiology in the year 2016 is 167,000. That's not true. It's it's over 1 million. Pivot tables do not update to reflect changes in the data. They are not like worksheet functions. That's a big disadvantage of them. Let me drink some water. You have to right click in the pivot table and refresh. Before I do, look at N3 again, 167,000. Refresh, now it's over 1 million and it is correct. since the raw data do change periodically, maybe frequently, if the pivot table shows the sales in the last 90 days, then every day the data is changing. If your assistant types up the work and he forgets to refresh the table and prints out our PDS, the pivot table, you cannot tell if it's been refreshed. If your boss, of course, is going to blame you because you didn't catch your assistant's error. Let's see what I wrote. There is no indication that it needs refreshing. I wish the screen would turn a different color saying refreshing required. Let me give you 3 minutes from 43 to 46. Let's go to filters and slicers. My data start in A3 with the field title and go down to G303. There are some hidden rows. Maybe not. We already have a pivot table. It has a filter field. I'm going to recreate it and compare it to the existing one, but not yet. Let's look at the existing pivot table. Bill is not doing well. 3,100 is the lowest of all the salespeople. Let's look at the drill down capability of a pivot table. This shows Alan sold in Asia and in Europe for a total of 8,979. Watch as I double click one of the cells in the pivot table. A new sheet is created entirely for Alan. The cell I double clicked was Alan's totals. And this drill down capability shows you that he sold in Asia and Europe only of the DEX 300, the DEX 200, the DEX 100, and so forth. Back to the sheet filters and slicers. Let me undo the drill down and do it again. Allen, 8,979. Double click the 8,979, and there is how the 8979 was calculated. All of these are Allen's sales. Let's go back to the pivot table. Let's double click the Asia total, 26,658 in the pivot table. Double click it, and we get yet another new sheet. All of it for Asia. We see that Alan and Clark and Gloria and Iris and Helen and so forth sold in Asia. Let's create the pivot table again. Select I-39 to start the table. Use this design, salesperson in rows and so forth. I want to start it in the green cell. Let's see what Excel is going to do when there's already data in the way. Select one cell in the raw data. Insert pivot table. Confirm A3 to G303. Existing worksheet. And start it in the green cell. In this case, Excel is considerate enough to warn me that there's data in the way. There's already data. Do you want to replace it? Okay. Now it does not know how much data, how much room to take. It has no idea what the design will be. So it takes a wild guess at 3 columns and this many rows. And it deletes the, no, it didn't delete it, but it's hard to find the text box. That's why I want you to have a separate screen or a printout of the class pack. Create the pivot table again, select I-39 to start it. Salesperson in rows, area in columns. I don't see my field list because the active cell is not in the pivot table. Now there's the field list. Salesperson in rows. What did I ask for next? Area in columns, volume in the sum of fields. Area in columns. Pivot table. This is not the pivot table, not yet. This is not the pivot table. Excel thought it would need these cells, but it did not. Area in rows. No, area in columns. And now Excel realizes it needs even more space, so it asks me for permission. Sum of volume in values. Close the field list. Salesperson in rows, area in columns, volume in sum of values. Right-click, show field list. And now finally, I want to populate the filter field. So back to the field list. I ask for, let me double check something. Year in filter. Back to the new pivot table. Year in filters. At this point, it does something strange. Not that big a deal, but it actually needs to expand upward, not downward. It asked me where to start the pivot table. I answered the question by that gold cell. Well, there's already a gold cell, so let's take a green. I told it to start the pivot table here, but it actually went further up. A minor point, but I used to have hair right here, and once I spent 15 minutes wondering why it was asking me for space because there was nothing below or to the right. I pressed the delete key, I deleted the entire rows, the columns, I did it again. And it turned out it was looking for space above. I wasted my time thinking. Did you hear about the dyslexic who had trouble sleeping, wondering if there is a dog? When selecting the cell to place a pivot table with a filter field, be sure there are empty cells above your cell. I will select I-39, but the table starts 2 cells higher. It's helpful to compare classic layout, which I have in the first one, and default layout, which I have in the second one. First of all, let me get rid of the data, important data that Excel did not use. Sum of volume, area salesperson, sum of volume, same thing. This is classic layout. This is default layout. I don't like column labels, row labels. Instead of row labels, I'd like to see salesperson. Instead of column labels, I'd like to see area. That's the major difference. So right click, pivot table options, display tab, classic pivot table, okay. I can make the columns a little wider. And except for the comma format, 3732, 3732, 888, 888, they are now the same. Before changing to classic layout, compare the new and old. Show different years, so recent years only. If I want to see only, select multiple rows. Let me cancel that. Click the drop-down arrow by the filter field. Choose select multiple items. Toggle off all, and let's see the last 2 years only. 2019, 2018 in this example. Let's read my cell comment. Deselect regions. Notice P is the grand total column, P. Let me deselect East and deselect Europe. And now N is the grand total. Deselect regions, see the pivot table shrink. Let me give you 3 minutes. This in pinkish, optional further readings, not testable. Three minutes. I have an uncanny ability to make people instantly euphoric, even when they're not students that I have control over the grades. I can make anybody instantly euphoric. All I have to do is leave the room. That's a variation on the saying, some people spread happiness wherever they go. Other people spread happiness whenever they go, whenever they leave. Let's look at grouping in pivot tables. The sheet is grouping 1. I have raw data in A and B. On this date, it's sorted already. January 2nd, 2016 is the earliest date. Somebody worked 4 hours and 5 hours and 4 hours. The next date is January 4th, 2016. Nobody worked on January 1st, New Year's Day. Nobody worked January 3rd. I have the 5th, but not the 6th. This is a pivot table already grouped. No, it's not already grouped. This is a pivot table already created. On January 2nd, 2016, 13. That's 4 plus 5 plus 4. The blue 13 is the sum of 4, 5, and 4. The green 16 is the sum of 7 and 9. Let's look how to group in a pivot table. Right click in the date field of the pivot table, not in the data, and choose group and answer the question. Do you want to group by months, by quarters, by years, by months and years? Let's do that. Let's group by months and years. So in 2016, the 12 months of sales are given, followed by 2017, the 12 months of sales, 2018 and 2019. It looks like I only go through July of 2019. Let's toggle off the subtotal. 2016, let's look at this green. I don't want to see the 2016 total. I don't want to see the 2017 total. I don't want to see the 2018 total. Right click in that column, not necessarily on one of the green cells. Right click and toggle off subtotal years. Let me undo that to show just solely so I can show you again. Right click and toggle off subtotal years. Let's group differently. Right click in the date column, group. I've got it by months and years. Let's look at it by months independent of year. I want to check the seasonality of my sales by months only. And there's my January sales, February, March. A little bit of seasonality. Grouping in pivot tables. Let's right click and ungroup. And there's the pivot table again. Let me give you 2 minutes till 4:10. Let's go on to grouping 2. In the example we just saw, we grouped in a time field. So the possible ways to group were given to us: months, quarters, years. In the next case, where we have general text labels, Excel cannot guess how we might want to group. We'll have to be specific about which names comprise the groups. We have a table of nurses and job completion times. Marguerite, 0.2 hours. Me, 0.85 hours. Robert, 0.83. Joe, 0.87. You want the average time for Barbie, Mary, and Tom combined. They've been working for us for years. We have several new nurses: Cheryl, Karen, me, Lita, Marguerite, Mary, Joe, new hires. And I would like a separate total for them. Let's create a pivot table with nurse in the rows and job time averaged in values. I've already done that. We're going to group and ungroup and regroup and ungroup this pivot table. So here's an image of what I want it reset to after we make changes, the original one. I want a group, I want a subtotal, the average times for Barbie, Mary, and Tom combined. Let me select, in no particular order, Barbie, Mary, with the control key, or Tom. Right click and choose group. Group 1 is Mary, Barbie, Mary, and Tom. I just marked it green. And then we have the group 1 total. And then the next group, well, the next group is Cheryl, Cheryl total, Joe, Joe total, Karen, Karen total. That seems cluttered. Let me right click in column D and toggle off subtotal nurse. Please make it look like this. The colors are for your information only. I want Barbie, Mary, and Tom in one group called group 1. I want everybody else in the other group. Let's do that. Let's select the other names. Barbie, Mary, and Tom, remember, what were the people who've been working for us for a long time. In this case, nurses. In other cases, financial analysts, sales reps. Select all those pinkish, tannish ones, right click and group. Now let's protect anonymity. I don't want to embarrass anybody by saying, look how slow this person is. Let's drag away the nurse title. And now I have the group 1 total and the group 2 total. And I'm not embarrassing anybody with sensitive salary information or whatever. Let me give you a minute, then I'm going to show you a problem. In the room, how many of you learned a few things already today about pivot tables? That's an ongoing problem that I have. Fully half of you are bored and the other half are scrambling to keep up. And all I can do is pick a happy medium. I remind you that you cannot change a pivot table, but interestingly, you can change the labels. AAA, B, BBB. Let me undo that. You can change the labels. Let me make an intentional mistake and tell me what I did wrong. HIRES. So the new hires are faster than the people who've been employed for a long time with us. That's not true. I typed the wrong labels in there. I typed them in the wrong area, in the wrong order. I don't think Excel should let you do that, but it does let you do that. The 0.51 is for the long employed. The 0.58 is for the new hires. Let me mention briefly averages. It's red, so you don't have to know that sheet. We're not going to cover it, but I want to talk about it briefly. The concept of an average is confusing. I think you know that if you take a heavy course load in one module and get a 3-point average, and you take just 2 courses in another module and get a 4-point, your average is not the average of the averages. If you take a heavy load and get a 3-point and a light load and get a 4-point, your average is closer to 3 than it is to 3. And it's not 3.5, it's about 3.4 or 3.3. There is an apparent error in Excel, but it's not an error. It just appears to be an error. Let me show you. I'm going to take the average of the averages, which is not allowed. You're not supposed to do that. The simple average of Ethan Allen, well, there's only one, so in blue is $100. The simple average of Ethan Allen lamps is 125, 130, and 120. You don't have to pay attention. You can listen at a vaguely and just go for the big point. Ethan Allen sofas averages 120. Ethan Allen tables 120. If Excel says the average of the unit price is 118.888 with round off error. Yet if you take the average of the averages, you'll get a different answer. It appears that Excel is wrong. Excel is not wrong. I am wrong by trying to take the average of the averages. I should never do that. I heard a story, I think, at the Stanford Business School once where a student would flunk out if his GPA was too low. And the registrar mistakenly told some students they were on academic probation because the average of the averages was too low. But that's not relevant. But the registrar thought it was relevant. You have to go back to the raw data and calculate it from scratch, which is, of course, what Excel does. 118.89 is correct. 116.25 is not correct. It's not relevant. I go through the math here if you feel like it. Not relevant. Not testable, that red sheet. Let's go back to go to tables. 411. Everybody with me on tables? Tables overview. I call your attention to one fact before I begin lecturing. So I'm in sheet formulas with normal ranges. It's yellow, meaning you don't really have to look at it. There's nothing new in here. I have a hidden bunch of columns, A, B, C, T. Right click and unhide. What I'm going to do would normally be off the screen, not visible. The formula summing the data would not be visible alongside the data itself. Let me undo that. The formulas that I'm going to critique might be in another sheet. They might be in another book. All right, let's go on. I got a bunch of data. It is named, my named range for teaching. I sum in T14 without using the named range, and in T15 using the named range. 50 grand is the summation of those numbers. There's no error. Now let me append some data. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on a range that previously bordered. The formula does not update to include newly entered data that appends the original range. It does not update. That's a given fact. Not very profound, but problematic. That's why it's yellow. Let's go to tables. I have a large example, but I hid a bunch of rows to make it convenient for you. Rows 1 through 9 and then 904. There are 1,000 rows in the table, including the field titles, which means there's 999 records. I have in G1 the summation, let's trace the precedence, of all the purchases. Two things are going to be obvious. The notation is strange with a table, but look carefully right now where I append to the data a new record, 999,999, and the formula updates. That's very significant. Whenever you have dynamic ranges, that is, the range of data you're summing changes every few days or every day, like the sales, cumulative sales this month. The cumulative sales for the last 90 days. Every morning you throw out the data that's 91 days old and you append the new data that just came in from yesterday. In that case, this is a serious problem. The formulas don't update, but they do update if you use a table. And that's worth considering itself. So let's learn a little bit about tables. The big thing is that they update when you append data. The minor thing is they use awkward notation. This is equal sum, open parentheses, close parentheses, followed by the name of the table. I named it vendor data, followed by the name of the field that I'm summing, purchases. Let me show you if you press the tab key, follow along with me. If you press the tab key, it keeps going to the end, but not in a table. It goes to the end of the table and then it jumps back. That's kind of handy. A table field is displayed, the formal end of the table field is displayed by the size handle. That's strange. It's that reverse L, an angle bracket or something like that. The size handle marks the end of the table. I find that odd. Let's append yet a new record. Another sale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have not hit enter yet. The table has not expanded to accommodate the new record. Enter, now it has. To increase the size of the table, the range you're summing, just append records at the bottom. The table expands, and therefore, any formula that references the table expands because the table expanded. Let me undo, and you'll see, in fact, I have to undo twice because two things happened after I entered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The cell took the data, and then separately, the table expanded. Undo. Okay, now temporarily, the table does not include the new data. I have to undo again because two things happened. Let's delete a record in a table. It's not quite as simple as appending. Right-click anywhere in the row you want to delete and choose delete and choose table rows. And the 999 is gone. Let me do it again. Let me append 999. Appending a record is just, you just type it and the table expands. You'll find tables in the Name Manager, Formulas tab. Name Manager. Along with the named ranges. Larry is a named range. Department Sales is a table. Print Area is a named range. Look at the symbols Excel uses. Print Area is a named range, and therefore Larry has the same symbol. It must be a named range. Table 4, Vendor Data, Reference Me, and Department Sales are all tables. including the new 999,999. That hurts my feelings. When I was your age, I used to ask out these German women. They all said 999. A joke. Take a minute and read my notes right here. My notes on the images, a named range, and about a page of comments on tables. Let me talk. A table is a formally declared range of data in standard form. A2 to E1000 illustrates that. Selecting any of these adds the Table Design tab at the far right of the ribbon. For example, in the table, there is the table, it's the Table Tools. Table Tools Design. Select a cell outside of the table. Now the name of the book is Tables Overview, but we don't have the Table Tools tab of the ribbon unless we're in the table. Not in the table, no tab called Table Tools. In the table, there is a tab called Table Tools, which lets you change the name of it, lets you change the format, header row. Take a minute to read that. Let me talk a little bit more. Let's press the Tab key near the bottom of the table. Watch me, please, my screen. It's going to insert new empty rows, which can be handy if you prefer to append new data. That can be a handy technique. Let me do it again. Let's delete these rows. You cannot press the delete key. That'll clear the contents, but it won't delete them from the table. Look at the size handle. Select a few cells in a column, right-click, delete table rows, and they're all deleted. Now you could just type the new data right here if there's room, or you could tab, and tabbing beyond the end of the table puts empty rows at the end. Makes it a little bit easier to update the data. A table, a formally declared range of data in standard form. The size handle marks the end. Of course, there's the size handle now. You can't read the size handle if the cell is active. Maybe you can with your vision. You're younger than I am. You can see it more clearly, but not very clearly with the cell not active. You can resize the table by dragging the size handle down or up. Let's work an in-class problem. Go away. Here I have some patient names, including some hidden rows. It's irrelevant that they're hidden. All arithmetic operations consider hidden rows equally as well as unhidden rows. I have the summation in H4, the sum of F4. Append the new data to the bottom and nothing's going to happen because it's not a table. So let's undo that. Convert it to a table. Right click anywhere, just like we were creating a pivot table. Not right click, select one cell, insert, not pivot table, not recommended tables, but table. And to answer the question, where is the data? A3 to F85. That includes the field headers. Excel guesses that my table has headers. It's right. Here's a column entirely numeric, except for the top row, which is text. That's a giveaway that that's a field title. Okay. And it applies a format. You can change that format by using one of these. That's cosmetic, aesthetic. It's not testable in this course. I'm not going to change your grade because you used a beautiful color that matched the colors that artists recommend. I don't even know what that means. If you want to change the format, you may. So now we created a table, and let's drag the new records, append them to the bottom. Before I do, look at 9,000 in H3. Put the new records at the bottom, 9,666. So now you know how to create a table and how to use it. Because the formula in H4 was created before it was converted to a table, the formula uses ordinary Excel notation. Let's recreate the formula. Equals the SUM, open parentheses. What am I summing? The balances, I guess, right in here. And it's the sum of table 5 balance. That's right. Get the same answer. If you put a formula, if you create a formula for a range of data that is a formal table, it will use the convention sum, open, table name, open brackets, field name. Let's go edit the table. I don't like the default name, table 5. Go to the, first of all, you have to be in the table, not out here. In here, you get the Table Tools tab, Design, and the name of the table is Table 5. The rules are the same as for a named range. You cannot have embedded blanks. My new table, I'll call it. Oh, that's a good way, Mark. I made a typo. That's, my goodness. I guess the name of the table is my new TAABLE_. Let's correct it. Design tab. Let's get rid of it all. I'll spell it ridiculously so you can see what in fact is happening. My TTTAABBLLE, an intentional typo, just so you can see that the name would update. You create, you got to start, how do you create a table? You start with a normal range. You type or copy and paste, download from the internet, the numbers there, and then you right click. No, you don't right click. You go to insert table. Let me try it again, but it's going to unhide a bunch of rows. To convert a table to a normal range, right click, that's where I kept getting that from. Table, convert to range. Confirm, yes. Now, in spite of the formatting that is associated with the table, it is not a table. We would have to go to insert table. And the name is going to be table 5 or table 6, And I can rename it right here. All right, what did we learn today? 2 new linear programming examples, the intern scheduling and the Shell credit union. Then we learned pivot tables, including grouping. What's the big disadvantage of a pivot table? Correct. The numbers do not update to reflect changes in the raw data. I could live with that, but I wish at least at the bottom of the sheet, it would say calculate or something like that. I wish it would give you some indication. The reason they don't update is that tables are so powerful, it would slow down even a fast computer with all the grouping capability that you can do in date fields. And you can change from the sum to the average and so forth. They've got quite a capability, but they don't update. Then we saw tables. Somewhere in here, I say, go to the yellow cell and skim it. Skim the yellow tab sheets. I think there's only one. Read the green sheets, and you can totally skip the red sheets as far as the course is concerned, unless you're curious. Okie dokie. On Wednesday, I will start the review session at 2 o'clock. Very commonly, no one comes, except for the first one. If no one has come for 10 minutes, I'm going to cancel. If no one, if I start the review and everybody goes away, I'm not going to stay until 3 o'clock. So come at the beginning if you want. I'll talk about sorting and some elementary review. Have a good day. Credit union, intern schedule, lecture and shell pivot table.